You have to have a very clear idea on the type of people that you mesh with and that you can help best. And not only am I saying no to people, I'm saying no when people ask me things that I don't know. Set the pace. Fast enough to move, slow enough to last. That one thing that didn't go your way, it defines nothing in the grand scheme of your life. The question is like, what happens now? What happens next? If one of those things isn't right, that is 33% of the 90% of fulfillment. Start there and work your way down. Make changes in those areas. And I promise you, things will feel better for you.
Shawn Rider, my man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ethan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you've been someone who I've been, following and interacting with for a couple years now, and you've got a strong message and you've got something to talk about. So I'm just excited to have you on the show here, man.
All right, well, I'm excited to see what comes out of my mouth. I was talking to someone last night, another guy at my kids' gymnastics practice, and we were talking about the difference between like just doing the thing and then planning to do the thing. And I'm like, I don't like to plan to do the thing. I just want to do the thing. So if someone brings me on stage, of course I plan a little bit, but at the end of the day, I really don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. So when I jump on these podcasts, it's the same thing. Like I know what I can say. I don't know what I will say. So let's see where this thing goes.
Yeah, I'm like you, man. Like I just like to go by my heart. Like I have a pretty clear understanding of like my values, my mission, and I can pretty much talk about those at any given time. So, but I don't really rehearse stuff. So, you don't know how that's all going to come out,
That's right. That's right.
Well, tell me something you're excited about right now. What do you got going on? Something in your life that you're just pumped about?
It's wild that you asked that question because we started bringing more guests on our podcast, the Tactical Empire podcast. And the last question I asked them is, what is the project that you're most excited to work on? And that's how we end the podcast. So thank you for leading. We didn't discuss that. That's what you're going to lead with. So you're really going right to the jugular. Dude, I'm 36 and I'm so grateful for the amount of suck and work I put in my 20s to get where I am today. So, whereas when I ask that question with guys that we've helped, they're really talking about how they're buying back their time and they're spending more time with their family. And the cool thing is like, I've already been there and I've been doing that. And so I'm in this portion of my life right now where my kids are 7 and 4. So I still have a lot of time with them, but because I've had all this freedom, I can actually work on some pretty cool projects. And the two projects that I'm working on are the two businesses that I'm involved in. And it's the Tactical Empire, which is a men's only mastermind group that me and Jeff Smith run. He's been on your podcast here recently. And, we're getting together a really awesome core group of men that want to just, in a short sentence, is like improve your life. Whichever area of your life has been lacking, mainly around family, fitness, finances, and the freedom that you want, we have strategies to help them get there. And we've been doing it long enough with enough people to have a proven track record that what we teach works. So I wake up and I'm thrilled to work on that. I am absolutely thrilled to be in my mid-30s, basically working with people that I want to work with. In my 20s, and I was trying to build my first business, which was a CrossFit gym, I would take anybody. It's like, if you want to pay me, come on in. And now I'm in this portion of my life where it's like, oh, I don't want everybody. I want a very specific group of people. The other project is we closed down the CrossFit gym earlier this year and we went right into the Metabolic franchise system, which is they're the leader in strength and conditioning, boutique fitness. So it's another gym. And the interesting thing is from day one, they've had a very dialed in client avatar as well. And so it's like, I understand that even in that business where it's still fitness and the doors are open to anyone, we don't want everyone. And so that's kind of like what I'm most excited about, Ethan, is like, I get to say no to people. And, I understand what you're about. I probably understand the type of people that listen to the podcast, so they won't be taken back by that statement. But if we threw that statement on Instagram and the algorithm took off with it and put it in front of the masses, everyone would be like, that's so disrespectful that you want to say no to people. And those people just don't understand. Like, that's what you have to do to
Yes.
succeed. Like you have to have a very clear idea on the type of people that you mesh with and that you can help best. And not only am I saying no to people, I'm saying no when people ask me things that I don't know. And that's one thing in my 20s, you have this big ego and you want to solve everyone's problems. And even inside the tactical empire, like guys come to me with some issues and I'm not qualified to answer those things. Whereas if they asked me that when I was 28, I would try and answer it. Now I'm just like, hey, dude, I'm not the best guy for that, but here's some other people that I'm connected with that are better suited to answer that question. So Jeff and I have become not just mentors and coaches to these guys. We're basically creating a network inside the tactical empire and outside the tactical empire to connect men with who they need right now in this moment. So that's my long-winded answer to like what I'm most excited about, brother.
Yeah, man, I love how that approach to it, because I'm the exact same way. Well, I went through some phases of entrepreneurship, and as you mentioned, one of those phases is like probably the one I'm least proud of, and I call it like my people pleasing phase, right? Like where I just, I have a talent at kind of like knowing what people want and what they want me to say and what, you know what I mean? And I spent a lot of time like trying to be everything to everybody, and and it was very people pleasing, and it just ran me into the dirt. I was miserable. So anyone who's listening to this podcast, like you said, that's like, oh, that's offensive or whatever, it's like, no, bullshit. Like, look, there's an expert out there for everybody, but I am not the right person for everybody, and I needed to figure that out. And so you're way ahead of the curve from me, from having, it took me a long time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. And I'm just now jumping into the Tactical Empire, which has been super fun and cool. But you guys really have created this amazing group of men who are super supportive, and like already like in the private group, I'm seeing these questions and the way that everybody's supporting each other and answering them and everything. And I'm just curious for you, like what led to you like wanting to create that? Something, I know it's kind of a newish endeavor, right? Like a year or two, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's being involved in it from this perspective, from the role that I have now as partner and mentor, is about a year for me, but I can't take credit for creating it. This is Jeff's baby originally. About 3 years ago, he went out and created the Tactical Empire. And Jeff was my mentor in another mentor group. And so thankfully I was paired with him, because this group had like 25 mentors, and I got on an intro call and I was like, hey, I'll sign up. And they're like, hey, we're going to put you with this guy. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. And so he's been mentoring me for about 5 years now. And then a little over a year ago, well, about 2 years ago, I joined the Tactical Empire. And so Jeff continued to be my mentor, and I was a client, and I saw what he was doing. And at the end of summer last year, 2023, he gave all the guys like a free 30-minute wrap up the year call. And I was on that call, and we just started talking. And we've always been pretty much on the same wavelength. But in that call, we realized that him and I ultimately have the same mission. And because he mentored me, we truly believe in the same shit. And he was, I don't want to say floating the Tactical Empire along, but he was a one-man band. And he's just a little bit older than me, and he connects with the demographic that's his age and a little bit older, whereas I connect with my age group and a little bit younger. And so we just talked it out, and it was like, hey, I think this is the time where he can bring me on and I can reach a different demographic than him. So him and I doing this together is about a year old. And I appreciate you saying that you've come in and you see the value in what we've created, because as a business owner, like you always try and see the areas that you can improve upon. So I appreciate the words of affirmation. That's my love language. So I do appreciate those words. But we just had a really cool meeting yesterday with me, Jeff, and our 2 virtual professionals. And we basically did a traction EOS meeting, and it was like, where do we need to make the most progress in the next 90 days? And so we're looking at the areas to make this cohort, this network, this group of men even better. I know we have a really good thing going on, but we ultimately want to help somewhere around 100 to 150 men on a regular basis. And, we're just shy of halfway there. So I appreciate the things that you've said about what we've put together. So him and I are super excited about it. The interesting thing is like, Jeff and I have created the lives that we want, right? Like I'm married with 2 kids and I basically work 2 hours a day and I work on more than one business within those 2 to 3 hours. And I'm always home in the morning. I'm always home at night. And if I want to pick my kids up early, I can pick them up early. Jeff sold his house in Texas and has been RVing with, him, his wife, 4 kids and a dog for basically 6 months at least. And they're going to see every state that they can drive to in the next 2 years. And they homeschool their kids, and he's building a business out of an RV. And so what's interesting is, how do we build, this is a rhetorical question, how do we build what we want to build while maintaining what we have? You've met all the business owners that always go for more. So I actually hesitate to say, hey, we're halfway to our goal and we want to grow this thing, but we want to grow it in such a manner to where it doesn't negatively impact the more important areas of our life. Like our professional life is to help these men in the Tactical Empire, but not at the detriment to our fitness, not at the detriment to our marriage, not at the detriment to our parenting. And I say that with the Tactical Empire, and I also say that with the metabolic gym that I'm opening. Like I have very clear guardrails that I have to stay between in order to keep what it is that I have, because I know what I have is enough and it's what I want right now.
Yeah, and more isn't better. I think that you've clearly learned that lesson, and that's something like I was talking about with my people pleasing phase. That was it. I just kept giving of myself, and if someone wanted my time, I gave it to them. It didn't matter when it was or for what reason or whatever. And I think that those clear boundaries that you're talking about, that you and Jeff clearly have, and that you mentor all these men in your group to have, that's powerful, because you can have everything you want without like basically selling your soul and giving up and giving up all of what the other things that you want in your life. It's just most people don't realize that, because the message, the discourse out there is grind, work harder, work 20 hours a day. You know what I mean? There's like there's a message about that, which is just completely bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, that was the message that I followed when I was 20, not married, without kids, when I was a high school teacher trying to leave a $35,000 a year pre-tax job to be like, and it worked for me. But I'm looking back and I'm like, holy shit, like people are doing that in their 40s with married and 3 kids. Like what the, and here's the kicker. They may say they want to not work that much, but their actions prove different. They're literally staying at the office an extra 5 hours, when at the end of the day, it's not moving the needle. They're staying at the office for an extra 5 hours and not going to the gym. Like, no, I have to build this business. The payoff is going to be there. No, it's not. Like, we know none of us are going to get to the peak of the mountain. Like it's all false summits the whole fucking way forever. So when you I don't want to say get comfortable at base camp, but like when you can recognize that you have what you want or need, and you incrementally define growth, right? Like I'm not against growing. I want to grow in all areas, but I've defined growth and I understand my pace. I've been really high recently, and this is the message that I presented on at the last Tactical Empire meetup. We meet in person twice a year. So we have the online group, which is where we connect every single week, but we meet in person. We were at Scottsdale, Arizona last month, and I gave a presentation. It was called Cut the Shit, Master the Basics. And it was all about going back to simplicity. We've all overcomplicated everything in our lives. And so you need to define growth. You need to understand Pareto's principle, what 20% of your actions in all areas of your life are yielding 80% of the results. Take the 20% and turn that into the 80% and allocate the extra 10 to 20% for your new strategy, the new idea. But that should not encapsulate and encompass your whole new schedule. And one thing that I want to acknowledge here is like, if you continually improve every area of your life, right? When people look at the Tactical Empire and they're like, okay, the 4 F's, family, fitness, finance, freedom. And we're going to get better at all those every 90 days and blah, 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 blah. And if I get better at all those, my entire life's going to be better. In a short response, yes. But the dichotomy is it's like a machine. A machine may have numerous parts, but if you improve every individual part of the machine, it doesn't mean the machine is better. because what matters is how the parts interact. It's about the software, not the individual parts. So you could improve the areas of your family. You can improve the areas of your fitness. You can improve the areas of your finance. You can improve the areas of your freedom. But if you, and we say you are the asset, if you're not good up in your head, if you're still pushing with too many habits, too many podcasts to listen to, too many books to read, too many mentors, too many new ideas, too many, dates with your wife. Yes, there is such a thing. Too much sex to where it's forceful and you're not doing it naturally. Too much time with your kids, too much time alone. Like, you get to a breaking point because the software is going to start breaking down. You have a certain level of work capacity and you can't blow past that. You have to incrementally move the needle. So the biggest thing, and the quote that I had that is resonating with me, is for business owners, high achievers, executives, high W-2 income earners, people who want to improve and get better. My quote for this year, I have annual themes, and the theme for the past 2 years has been the same. It was to be famous in my home. Because I spent my 20s building a business, and the first 4 years of my first child, who's my daughter, the first 3-4 years of her life, I wasn't completely present. And so the past 2 years, it was be famous in my home. And that's when I made the big shift to prioritizing family. And I'm there. I don't want to lose that. But this is the first year where I've changed the theme. And the theme for this year, which is what I've been preaching on, is set the pace fast enough to move, slow enough to last.
Yes.
And I think that encapsulates, if that's the right word, encompasses basically what I've done over the past 2 years is like, I know I want to move forward, but I have to do it strategically to where I don't break myself, my marriage, my family, or the businesses that I'm building.
Yeah, I think there's so many powerful messages in there that I want to highlight for people who might be listening. One of which, and I recently had one of my buddies, my Ranger buddies, went on to Delta Force, and I had him on the show recently. His episode's coming out in a week or two, and he spoke to something that you mentioned that I just really want to highlight is like the people who are the best at anything in the world really have just mastered the basics. Like they do the common things better than anybody else. And that's super important because a lot of people get caught up in this, no, you have to do the sexy things, better than everybody else. And that's really not true. And I think that that's one of the messages I've heard from you and Jeff, like, let's get down to the basics and let's like really get good at those things. And the other message that you're talking about right now, which I think is super powerful, is it's the ecosystem, right? It's, if, as you mentioned, if you get too strong in any one area, and you think, I'm a strength coach, so I think about the ecosystem that is the human body. If your legs get way stronger than your core and your upper body, you're going to start to have problems. Mm-hmm. And so everything kind of has to elevate. If you want to be sustainable and you want to keep that strength going, and in this case, if you're talking about your family or your finances or your fitness or whatever, everything kind of has to slowly level up with it or something's going to break, you know? Yeah, go ahead.
And so the other thing is like, you have to test your limits every now and again. And there's lower limits and there's upper limits. So I'm high on this topic of enough. And people think enough means complacency. That's not what I'm referring to. Like, in order to understand where your Goldilocks zone is, let's just use that phrase because people understand it, is you have to have too little of something and then you have to have too much of something. The example that is relevant in my life right now is my kids only do sports in the fall and the spring. They're only 7 and 4, and it's not this crazy, AAU and all the crazy thing parents are putting their kids in. It's just like, rec stuff. But this fall, we like our kids doing just rec gymnastics 1 day a week, pretty much year round. But when they do a sport, we take them out of gymnastics just because of the schedule and the family. But this is the first season. This fall season was the first season where both of our children were in a sport because my son's 4. So this is the first year he could do t-ball. He had t-ball. My 7-year-old daughter had soccer. But we Now, in hindsight, the mistake that we made was this is the first time we kept them in gymnastics. And it was only one night a week. And we were like, we're fine. One night a week. We got soccer twice. We got T-ball once. And they have their games on Saturday. We'll be fine. It was too much.
Yeah.
It was too much. But we needed to go through that season to recognize that. The issue is a lot of people will put their kids in all that stuff and they'll recognize that it's too much, but they won't do shit about it. But we recognized it was too much for our family. So now we're in wintertime. All the sports ended last week. And just even halfway through this week where we didn't have to go to practice on Monday night or Wednesday night, and we just had gymnastics last night, it's like, man, we have so much time to just settle back into our rhythm as a family without having to get home from school and then rush to this next thing, rush dinner, maybe delay dinner till later because we didn't have it prepped or whatever it may be. And so now we can recalibrate. And so me and my wife have already had that conversation. It's like, okay, when springtime comes, we're going to drop gymnastics for 2 months and the kids are going to do their sport and it'll be busier than it is now, but it won't be as busy as the fall. And how can we figure that out? We figure that out because me and my wife communicate about it. We figure that out because in the Tactical Empire, we just put the men through foundational prep for couples annual planning. And so me and my wife haven't done our annual plan for 2025 yet, but the foundation of the conversation has already started. What did we do this year? What went well this year? What didn't go as well as we thought this year? And what do we want for the next year? And one of the things is we talk about what the kids are involved in and how it's affected us. And that's, so that's like, take that story and the people listening to this, just implement that into one of the areas of your life. It doesn't have to be about your kids and their athletic endeavors.
Yeah, I think that that failure piece is really important. One of my what I consider my growth value as a person is embracing failure as a part of the growth. And because if you're never failing or you're not making mistakes or there's not things going wrong in your life, then you're probably not pushing hard enough. Like there's a level of comfort that's unhealthy also, like so that failure piece is really important, bumping up against it. And then that piece you just talked about is the biggest part of it, right? Like the failure you don't get anything out of the failure itself as a lesson unless you take the time to reflect on it. You look at it, you examine it, what went wrong here, what are some good things about it, what are some negative things about it, and how can we move forward in a positive, what will we do differently, moving forward. And I'm so glad you talk about that as a team with your wife, as a family, you guys do that level of reflection, which is powerful.
Yeah, I absolutely don't mind the word failure at all. I don't mind the label. The one thing that I have to work with men about is like, especially in today's society where it's either success or failure, because of the school system, like you either passed or you didn't, but that's not how real life is. And like what we teach in Tattoo Empire is like, you shouldn't try and be an A+ student in real life because A+ students have to do all this studying before they take the test. And then they're so worried about the score that defines them. But you want to know who wins the most in real life? The C- student who learns enough to get a C-, takes the fucking test, sees what they got wrong, and then learns what they got wrong. Like that's how the real world works. And so what I try and do with the men is like, I actually don't want them to label most things as failures because all this is it's a situation that didn't work out. And so we've been taught in society that one little thing that doesn't go our way is a failure. And I'm like, no, because like the sun comes up tomorrow and we just move the fuck on. Like there's so many negative connotation and high achievers understand this inherently, which is why we can say, oh, learn from failures. But some people don't respond that way. They're like, oh, I failed. They're labeling themselves instead of the situation. But what you and I, and which is why it's fine that you brought it up, is like we understand that we're not labeling ourselves, we're labeling the situation. So what I want to do is simplify the message for people and be like, that one thing that didn't go your way, it defines nothing in the grand scheme of your life. The question is like, what happens now? What happens next? Yes, of course, extract the lessons and see what you could do differently last time. But this is why we can move on so fast. And in my 20s, the difference between now in my 20s and my mid 30s is like the gap between like situation not working out, a la failure, and me recovering from it, that gap has shrunk. And I could say the same thing about my emotions, right? I'm really big into Stoicism. I read the Daily Stoic every morning. And for those that don't understand Stoicism, they think Stoics are unemotional. That's not what they are. They just understand their emotions and they process them. They try and process them, understand them quicker and process them faster. And that's the other big advantage that's happened in my 30s. I think being married and especially having kids has helped with that, because I just really don't have the luxury to like sit around and fucking mull about my feelings all day long. Like my kids need me to go do the next thing for them, or teach them how to do the next thing. So I just can't sulk. So, but I still need that alone time to process my emotions. And that gap between shit happening, like, God, dude, like opening this metabolic gym has been super exciting. But there's been fucking hurdles, some outside of my control, which I let them go because that's what I've learned through Stoicism. Some I've been associated with, and I'm like, oh, fuck. But I cut down the time needed to be emotional about the thing and just go right to, well, how do I need to respond about this? What needs to be taken? And so I think those are some of the takeaways. And the differences between, if you don't think you're achieving what you want, if you don't think you're, quote, a high achiever, if you're listening to this podcast, I think you are, because you're seeking things out like this. You're associated with Ethan. You either saw him post about this and you thought the title was good enough to listen to, or I shared it and you're in my network. So if you're in either of our networks, you're more of a high achiever than the majority of people. And so I just want you to understand that how you're viewing these things matters the most, as opposed to the thing and what happened.
100%. And I know you're a collegiate athlete. I was a collegiate athlete. And one of the things that I loved about sports, and I'm glad you talked, the reason why my kids are in sports, I have no expectation that my kids are going to be elite athletes, professional athletes, and like that. It's the lessons that come with sports. And one of the things that, speaking of coaches, a coach took me under their wing at an early age and really taught me that I've used my entire life, is this next play attitude, right? Like you'll see so many people in life, and you can use the sports analogy or business or whatever, is like a play won't go right. A move doesn't go correctly. And instead of, doing what I'll talk about as the right thing, they ruminate on it. They're thinking about it. They can't get over the fact that they missed a tackle or they missed a shot or whatever else. And one of the things is just next play attitude, right? I can quickly think about what didn't I do on that play, and now it's on to the next play. Right? Like there's another, like they're about to hike the ball again and I need to do my job. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think that that's a really important piece. That's like an underlying message of what you're talking about. Analyze it quickly, get through the emotions and use it to your advantage and move on.
Yeah. I love sports analogies, and more specifically, I love sports stories. So like you just saying that takes me right back to like two things, one short, one a little bit longer. So the short one is like, remember playing backyard football with your neighbors, and it was Hail Mary. It was Hail Mary all day, every day. And then you go and you watch the NFL on Sunday with your dad, and like they're super jacked up about a 2-3 yard run on first down. And it's like, Dad, why are they super excited about that? And they're like, well, think about it. If you get 3 yards every play and you have 4 downs to get a first down, you will get a first down, you will score every single drive. So you don't need Hail Marys every play. You don't need to go for the end zone. You don't need to hit a grand slam. That was the short lesson. The actual story that I want to tell is like 4th grade is the first year I could play football. And thankfully I had great football coaches all through my life. And that was my main sport. That's what I went to college for, and was thankfully on national championship Appalachian State football team the year we beat Michigan and beat Joe Flacco at Delaware in the national championship. Great story. 4th grade, I remember, I know exactly where I was. I know the elementary school. I know the field that we practiced on. I know where I'm standing. I'm 36. So this is probably when I was 11 or 12, 4th grade, whatever it was. And my coaches were teaching me the pursuit angle for the first time. And it was like, hey, if you're the outside linebacker on this side of the field and they're running that way, and you're not going to come straight across to make the tackle because they're just too far over. You need to use what's called the pursuit angle. You need to go angle yourself downfield, run as fast as you can, and we promise you can cut that person off if you start early enough. And so our coaches, they're probably in their late 20s, early 30s, but they're adults to me at 11, 12. They were the running backs, and they would run as fast as they could. and then we would do the pursuit angle. And every now and again, we'd catch them. Sometimes we didn't, whatever. Fast forward to my sophomore year of high school. So I'm 15, 16 at the time. We're playing a school. The running back on this school is the fastest kid in the state of Pennsylvania. His name was Knowledge Timmons. He was trying to qualify for the Olympics. He ran like an 11 something 100 meter dash in high school. They would run this sweep play with him where he just comes across the backside of the line, hike it, hand it to him. And he was just so fast, he'd loop around the outside and run down the field. And I saw it on tape. Well, I was the left cornerback. So he lined up on my side. He goes in motion. And as soon as he went in motion, I knew what was going to happen. He was going to get the sweep. And they were like 65, 70 yards away from the end zone. So as soon as he went in motion, I just started taking off downfield, like complete angle to the goalpost, basically the pylon. And I have it in my sophomore year highlight tape. He gets this ball and no one was even fucking close to him. He just ran around the outside and blew past our entire defense. And all you see on film is just me chugging down at this angle. And I didn't make the tackle. I quote caught him at like the 1 yard line, but he already had he just went in, right? But the video showed my not pun intended, because his name was Knowledge. It showed my knowledge on one, being able to read film and understand what the play was. Two, that I ran my ass off regardless of what anyone else on the defense did. And three, that I understood pursuit angle and that I almost made the play on the fastest kid in the state. And I put it in my film. I didn't make the tackle. But like, what is the lesson there? Sorry for that long-winded story. What's the lesson there? People can be faster than you. They can be stronger than you. They can be better than you. They can be smarter than you. But if you have the right pace, if you have the right angle, if you have the right work ethic, if you have the right patience to wait for the play, you can win.
Yeah, and the other piece to add to that is if you did the underlying work, the practice, right? Like all the things that led to that moment, right? You had to take the coaching, you had to work on it in practice, and that's where a lot of people kind of fall short. They don't want to do the unsexy, out of the limelight, like kind of like grinding everyday practice work. They just want it the highlight reel.
Yep.
Right? And they just want it to happen in the game, but it's not going to happen in the game if you didn't do all the shit, the years of work that like you did to get to that moment.
And to prove your point, like what happened the next play, not the very next play, but later in the game, I had an interception and I had a fumble recovery as a 10th grader on varsity, right? Like that didn't happen at my school. So that was a big deal to me. And like the difference, so like the hard thing that I struggled with building businesses and still do is because I was an athlete. So here's the downside to athletics when it comes to entrepreneurship or high achieving. The downside to athletics is I grew up that there was a scoreboard. I grew up that there was a start and there was an end time to a game. And that put in all the practice, put in all the work, but at the end of the day, there was a game. And so this is like the finite game versus the infinite game. In sports, it's a finite game. There's a start, there's an end, there's rules, there's a scoreboard. We understand who's winning and losing at the end of the day. Business is not that. Business is an infinite game. There are laws, but at the end of the day, there's really no rules to business. Like you run your business, there's principles to business, but like you might do something different than me in the same realm. Like I post to social media more than you. It doesn't mean I do it better. I just do it differently. My results are going to be different than you, but that doesn't mean I'm winning. It doesn't mean I'm getting a better life than you just because I have whatever it may be, more revenue, more profit, like all these metrics. So like growing my first business, it was like, what's the KPI? What's the most important thing? Oh, it's revenue. No, it's profit. No, it's cash flow. No, it's employee retention. No, it's client retention. No, it's how much your clients pay you. No, it's how much they stay with you. And like, I'm not downplaying data, but I struggled with that because I needed a scoreboard because I was a football player. And even though over time I understood there wasn't an end game unless I closed the gym, which I did, and move on to something else, the game of business didn't end for me. Just the vehicle I was using, the uniform I wore, the team I played for changed. I still struggle with that because I'm such a KPI metric driven. What's the number that means I'm succeeding? So I've had to evolve from, okay, the data matters for the success of the business, but that doesn't matter for the success of me and if I'm enjoying what I do. And so I've had to like hone in on my feelings and how the results are tied to what I envision for my life. So coming full circle, that's what we're doing at the Tactical Empire. We have to have this pseudo broad stroke vision of what we want in the main areas of our life. Then we deduce down to the next 12-month goals. Then we deduce it down to the next 30 to 90-day actions I need to take to hopefully get closer to that thing.
Yeah, I think that's really smart too, and I'm glad that you mentioned the infinite game versus the finite game, because that's a really important message. You know, it's like in sports, against sport. You know, there's a couple analogies in my own life that I can apply to this. But at the end of the day, you know, there's a football season, right? Like you've got, you know, whatever it is, 9-10 games in the season, and if you make it to the playoffs, so on and so forth. But eventually that season's going to end. But with family, finances, you know, freedom and fitness, there is no season. Right. Those happen all the time. There's no, you know, and you have to kind of figure out a way to keep those going at, you know, all the time. And that's where people need to figure out, where you talked about, you know, way earlier in the conversation, is how do I create a sustainable process for making this happen? I'm also, you mentioned something too that I've been thinking about a lot, is a lot of people are very outcome driven. Like you talked about the KPIs or the scoreboard, right? People are like, they're looking at that a lot. And I talk a lot about being process driven. But as I get on in the game more, you know, in the game of business, in the game of life, I'm realizing that it's not an either or, because, you know, it's a bit of a paradox. You kind of have to look at like if you're not looking at your KPIs, if you're not looking at your business metrics or your metrics in your family, fitness, you know, whichever thing, then you don't really know what process to follow. So you really do have to, you just can't get so locked on to either one. You kind of have to have the ability to harness both.
Yeah. I love that you bring this up, and not to fall down the rabbit hole, but like in the inner circle, especially when I work with men one-on-one, like they do fall into this either or mentality. And the thing that I say is like, it's not either or, it's this and. Especially when it comes to finances. They're like, I want to save for my kids' college. I want to have a retirement. I need to have a vacation fund. I need to have an emergency fund. And they have different tools for each one of those. I'm like, well, it's not either or. Like either you save for retirement or you have a 529 plan. Like you can do it all. Now, I don't want you to have all those different accounts. If you're in the inner circle, so you know what we teach. We're big practitioners of the infinite banking concept. We believe that you can have one financial tool for all of those things. So you can have this and that. And we want you to drive it through high early cash value life insurance and practice infinite banking. But this same mentality goes for every area of your life. It's like, oh, I can either have my health or overwork and have wealth. It's like, no, like prioritize your health and you will be more energetic at your job and you'll get a higher income and you'll build your business and you'll have more energy and you'll be more efficient. And it's like, oh, I either work 4 hours a day and cut my income, or I work 10 hours a day and have more income. No, you can buy back your time. You can prioritize your schedule. You can put in guardrails. You can work 4 hours a day and make way more money and have more time to yourself, have more time with your wife. That's what I've done. Like I've had to. Did I believe in it early? I was optimistic, but I'm an optimistic realist. So it was like, I don't know if this will work for me. So I had to prove it to myself. And I've proved it to myself that you can have this and that. So if you're listening to this and you're in this, like, I'm in this dichotomy where like, if I do this, I'm going to lose this. No. Like, figure out what you actually want. Get rid of the bullshit that's not getting you closer to that, and allocate the proper amount of time, not what you think you need. Like, keep cutting shit down until you have 2-3 good hours of work a day, 1 good hour to yourself, 2 good hours to yourself, 3-4 hours to your wife and kids every day. Like whatever those things are in your life. I know what they are for me. So those are the examples that I use. But I think we're hitting the nail on the head with this, Ethan.
Yeah. I like the idea of a minimum viable product. You know what I mean? Like in terms of like, let me distill this down to the very basics, the minimum amount that is effective. Right. And like you said, it's a trial and error thing. You don't really know what that is until you've kind of, and like you said, for a lot of us, it's different. You know, each of us has a little bit of a different mix. One of the things that keeps resonating with me while you're talking, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, and this was a problem for me, and it's a problem for a lot of people that I work with, is the, identity, right? Like, like you were a collegiate athlete on a national championship team, and you've had these business experiences, and sometimes we get locked into this is who I am, and then we have a problem being any other way, in terms of growth, like taking coaching, working on a new, like infinite banking and the high value insurance policies is completely new to me. So to me, it hasn't. No, that's not what I do. That my first thing is like, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. Although that's not really how I'm approaching it, but someone could get caught into that. I'm kind of curious about like where you see identity becoming a stumbling block for people.
I mean, that was me when I stopped playing college football 2 years in and sat on the couch for 3 months. Because first time since fourth grade, I went from fourth grade to sophomore year of college being a football player, and that was my identity. And then same thing with businesses. Oh, I can't close this business down because what am I then? And so I may not have a perfect answer, but in hindsight, like what I've had to learn and understand is what are the characteristics and what are the values and what is my work ethic? Like what is my psychology on how I want to approach life? And so life is this big broad stroke thing, right? We're all going through this journey of life. But what am I doing right now? And am I using the characteristics, values, and work ethic that served me well when I was, quote, a football player? What am I? And then the two months that I sat on the couch, I took that same work ethic and then put it into my schooling. Was it sexy? Was it exciting? Did I fancy myself as a student? No. But when I put that effort towards those things and then I got straight A's and I got on the chancellor's list and I earned a mini scholarship, it's like, oh, okay, like this work ethic does work in this area. I don't want to be a student the rest of my life, but then I became a teacher. It was like, okay, so how can I use my work ethic, a teacher and a football coach? So how can I use this work ethic to be the best, to provide to my students? And then I was the first teacher in my first year of teaching at 22 years old to get some sort of like, I taught finance and economics. And so there was some sort of blue ribbon award that the state of Virginia gave out. I was the first teacher in this district to earn that. And I did it in my first year. And then I opened a business and then and so my thing, and I think this comes back to one, understanding your characteristics, your work ethic, and the values that you want to live by. But you could use those things in the wrong environment. And earlier you said ecosystem. So the reason why I left teaching, I loved teaching. What I didn't love was the ecosystem. And it wasn't so much the school I was in, but it was the ecosystem of school. It was the expectation and the other baggage that came with it, and working with people that were 40 years older than me that were stuck in their ways and not growing and teaching the same shit the same way they did 20 years ago. That wasn't for me. And so I think one, it's micro and macro, or it's internal and external. One, I believe most people don't actually understand who they are and what they want. So, and that's a lot harder work. So if you want to start with easier work, it's about your surroundings, ecosystem, and environment. Are you working for the right company? Are you in the right industry? Are you working for the right boss? Are you getting around the right people? Are you getting in groups? Are you going to the right webinars? I think that's easy. You could basically fix that in the next month. People are like, no, I can't leave my job. Actually, the process of leaving your job is pretty simple. You just have to resign. You have to write the letter. Like, I walked to the principal's office at 8 o'clock in the morning and told her this would be my last year teaching, right? That process was pretty simple. Doing the thing was easy. Getting there was harder. So it's a psychological thing. That's why I'm saying internal is harder. So change the external and then do the deep work internal. I think that's the faster way to get there, even though the internal work is more important. It usually is not flipping a light switch, whereas changing your environment it's hard, but it can be a lot faster. So my answer to your question is understand yourself and change your ecosystem. And that way you'll actually be progressing the way that you want to.
Yeah, that's powerful. Like shaping your environment, most of the time we can control our environment. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control, but like you said, I can remove myself from a situation or an environment. which is really important. But it takes some wisdom to kind of realize, to not just keep ramming your head against the same wall over and over. And like you said, the longer work is, and this is where I try to get people to eventually, like you mentioned, it's not the what you're doing that's like the most important thing. It's the how you're doing it. And I think how we, each of us, choose to do things are in line with our values, whether we are aware of that or not. You know, a lot of people couldn't list for you, you know, they might be able to say, oh, I value this or I value that, but they can't like just spit them. They're not like constantly thinking about these are my values and these are how I make my decisions. But I think that that's a really important process for people, is like get super clear on what are your non-negotiable values. And then you can use those in any environment, in any role, in anything that you're doing, and you're probably going to be pretty successful.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this and you don't know where to start, I want you to think of these three things or answer these three questions. I'm going to phrase the same thing two ways, a statement and then a question. Like 90% of your fulfillment in life it comes down to three things: is who do you live with? Okay. Where do you live? And what do you do? Like those are like, that's 90% of it, Ethan. And like the question, like those were the questions, but like the statement that I say is like, love who you live with, love where you live, and love what you do. Like now the details of that is kind of what this podcast was about. But like there are people who don't love who they live with. Okay. I'm happily married. I'm faith. Like I believe in my faith. And there's some people like at our church that don't believe in divorce. I believe in divorce. Like if it's making you miserable, if you think you're not with the right person and you don't love who you live with, I'm all for it. It's not for me, but I'm all for it. I'm happily married. I love who I live with. I love my kids, all that good stuff. Love where you live: country, state, city, part of town, house. Me and my wife moved during the lockdowns. We built a house. We built it 5 miles outside of town because we didn't want to live in a neighborhood anymore, because we didn't like the kids knocking on our door when we were trying to eat dinner. We didn't like the noises at midnight. So we moved 5 miles outside town in a little 21 home neighborhood. Everyone's got 2 acres. My neighbors can't talk to me when I pull up to the house. I can wave to them and walk in my house. We have views of the mountains. I can see more sky than ever before in a neighborhood. You realize how much sky's out there when you're not surrounded by other houses. So I love where I live. Lastly, I love what I do. If one of those things isn't right, that is 33% of the 90% of fulfillment. Start there and work your way down. Make changes in those areas. And I promise you, things will feel better for you.
Yeah, I love that, because I actually struggle with how to distill it down and simplify it for people. And so that's an amazing nugget and way to think about it that I think is super useful for people listening to this.
Yeah.
All right, as we're bringing this episode to a close, I mean, we talked about so many different things, and people are definitely going to see you as an expert, and you're going to be someone that they're going to want to reach out to or follow or whatever. What are some ways that people can get in touch with you and follow you?
Okay. For me personally, I'm really big on Facebook and Instagram. So Shawn Rider on Facebook, ShawnRider. Might be easier to find me on Instagram at Shawn, SHAWN _ Rider, RIDER _. That would be me personally. Feel free to DM me, send me a message, whatever. If you're interested in what we do at the Tactical Empire, Instagram, at The Tactical Empire, our website, thetacticalempire.com, our podcast of the same name, The Tactical Empire. And we have a free community on Facebook, The Tactical Empire Community. It's got over 600 people in it. Pretty much the same content that's on Instagram with a little bit extra. And then if you're a man, own a business, high achiever, investor, executive, and you want to be surrounded by like-minded men, that is the Tactical Empire's Inner Circle. That is our paid mastermind group. Reach out to us directly through the website or me on my socials, and I'll jump on a free call with you. We'll talk 15, 20 minutes, see if you're for us, see if we're for you, and we'll move forward from there, man.
Awesome. Well, I'm super, super grateful for your time. It's never lost on me how giving you are with your information and your knowledge and your skills, and how you're out there. You know, this podcast is called Doing the Work, and you are a shining example of someone who's out there doing the work. And so I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.